Wade Wilson. He's an assassin, he's a lover, he's an answer to the question, what would happen if the state of mind that preceded muttering, "That's what she said," became sentient and started offering 10% off of gently used henchmen? He's a man of many talents. One of those talents is talking to himself. Like, a lot.
Like the kind where your year-long plan ends with the wrong guy getting dismembered!
He engages in very detailed, emotional, extended conversations with you, the viewer, a person that no one else in his universe can hear or see, the definition of a hallucination. But the truth is, this constant talking to himself is actually a sign that he is one of the most well-adjusted heroes in the Marvel universe. Hello, I'm Willarius the Therapist. Here at the Fictional Character Mental Health Cooperative, we offer mental health services to people with the misfortune of being featured in a movie, TV show, or video game. It is a very underserved population. If you believe in our mission of helping the Eeyores of the world live their best lives, or you are very good at telling a complete stranger that they suck at their job, we would love to have you join us. Coincidentally, if you are in the latter group, then get your keyboard fingers ready because I made a pretty extraordinary claim. The claim that this guy right here, #drive-by, is the most mentally stable protagonist of the MCU. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, so let's get to the analysis. So, let's assume, for the sake of argument, that when Deadpool does this,
is the mask muffling my voice?
He is, as far as the MCU is concerned, talking to himself. If someone is constantly talking to an invisible audience, it would be tempting to slap a schizophrenia sticker on it and call it a night. But there is more to that disorder than just hearing voices in your head. A diagnosis of schizophrenia requires the presence of both positive and negative symptoms for a period lasting at least 6 months. The positive symptoms are the things you are used to seeing on the on-screen portrayals of schizophrenia: the delusions, the hallucinations, the tics, the drama. But what you don't usually see is the other half of the clinical portrait of the disease, the negative symptoms. That is, limited emotional expression and social isolation. And in the case of Deadpool,
Soldiers of Fortune, drinks on me!
Yeah, the schizophrenia glove does not fit his tiny baby hand. But there are a number of conditions that can cause hallucinations and delusions. The second most likely culprit is mania. Mania is the high-energy, happy-go-lucky half of bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is the peanut butter and jelly of mental health diagnoses. It's a classic. Those of you who've already been following this channel have seen parts of it come up in various videos. In general, it is characterized by high-energy, goal-oriented behavior and high self-confidence, a feeling like you can do anything, alternating with periods of low energy, listlessness, low self-confidence, and a crushing weight that makes getting out of bed seem like climbing Mount Everest. What you may not have known about bipolar disorder is that it's on a spectrum with varying levels of intensity. At the lower end of the spectrum, we have cyclothymia. Diagnostically, cyclothymia is relatively rare because it's probably very common. Basically, if you experience highs that aren't quite hypomanic and lows that aren't quite depression, you meet the criteria for cyclothymia. Not sure why this is in the DSM, but I didn't write it. The next evolution is bipolar 2. Bipolar 2 disorders requires the presence of at least one hypomanic episode and at least one episode of major depression in a person's lifetime. This is where we begin to see symptoms that can cause a major problem for a patient. Those of you who remember our diagnosis of Arthur Fleck will recall the debilitating cycle of crushing lows and dangerously sporadic highs. Bipolar 2 is bad enough, but I'm afraid Mr. Wilson shows signs of the Charizard of bipolar spectrum, bipolar 1. Bipolar 1 is generally characterized by the presence of mania and major depression. However, there's a diagnostic wrinkle in the DSM that makes this the most likely diagnosis for the patient. That is, the fact that for the diagnosis of bipolar 1 to be endorsed, we only need to confirm the presence of a manic episode in the person's history. Mania being the extreme version of hypomania. As with many other mood disorders, a timeline is important. The timeline I propose is that the duration of his first confirmed manic episode is from the time he's released from the mutant lab to the end of the first Deadpool movie. According to the DSM, we need to confirm that during the disturbance there's an increase in energy and activity as evidenced by 3 or more of the following symptoms: inflated self-esteem or grandiosity. Wade's self-confidence is certainly high, but he doesn't appear to have that egocentric, I'm the hero that's come to save humanity grandiosity that's typical of mania. More on that later. Decreased need for sleep. Now I want to ask you something. Here's Wade Wilson in the middle of the night, and here's Wade Wilson in the middle of the day. When is he sleeping? And yet, throughout the course of the movie, we don't see his energy level go down at all. Flow of ideas, or the subjective experience that thoughts are racing. Can't confirm that. Distractibility, attention easily drawn to unimportant or irrelevant stimuli. For example,
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Negasonic Teenage. What the sh**? That's the coolest name ever! And I hope you're watching.
And example,
It's just confusing. Is it sexist to hit you? Is it more sexist to not hit you? I mean, the line gets real blurry.
increase in goal-oriented activity. Yep, more talkative than usual or pressure to keep talking. This can often look like words coming out impulsively. For example,
Here's what I'm actually gonna do. I'm gonna work through his crew until somebody gives up Francis, force him to fix this, then put the brain hole.
I don't want to see that or think of it again. But
excessive involvement in activities that have a high potential for painful consequences. I submit for your consideration the entire plot of Deadpool 1. We must meet criteria C. The mood disturbance is sufficient enough to cause a marked impairment in social functioning. Not really. Occupational functioning, an assassin before, an assassin after. Not really. Necessitate hospitalization. Not yet. Or there are psychotic features. Now, in the beginning of Deadpool 1, the viewer is introduced to the plot in the middle of the timeline. It is here, at the height of his goal-oriented, constantly energetic insomniac life, that Wade Wilson starts talking to his close personal friends that no one else can see, so he can catch them up on the events of his life. In other words, it is in the middle of his manic episode that he starts engaging with his hallucination, you the viewer. Now I realize this may be a little hard to accept since you are a real person, so you believe. But as far as Deadpool's universe is concerned, when he's talking to you, that would constitute a hallucination and a delusion, since no one else in his universe is aware of your existence. Therefore, we have the criteria for mania, and by extension, have the criteria for mild bipolar 1 disorder with psychotic features. So, I opened this video by talking about how Deadpool is so well adjusted to the life of being a Marvel cinematic superhero, and immediately went into explaining how he has a severe mental health diagnosis. I know how this looks, but just hang with me for a second. So far on this channel, we've been working at mental health issues from the perspective of the medical model of psychology. According to the medical model, all of these diagnoses are problems of cerebral chemistry and/or behavioral patterns, diseases to be treated. Solution: take these pills, chill out in here for a little bit, and you'll be okay. The medical model is the main theory in mental health professions, and, coincidentally, the one most likely to get insurance companies to pay for services, which is why we see so much of it. However, in the relatively short history of these disciplines, there are several theories of change proposed by thinkers from a variety of other disciplines. So while Wade Wilson would be a ridiculously frustrating patient for someone using the medical model, he would be an ideal candidate for someone like this guy right here. This is Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist, an author, and a Holocaust survivor. From his experiences in the concentration camps, he developed a theory of psychology known as existential psychology. The central assumption of his invention, logotherapy, is that, even more so than the problem of individual mental issues, is the larger problem of the absurdity of existence itself. And the job of the therapist is to come alongside the patient and help them in their process of making meaning out of this absurdity. In his most famous work, Man's Search for Meaning, he outlines how his experience in a concentration camp informs his psychological theory of change. He recounts his shared experience in a physically and psychologically extreme situation. According to Frankl, the critical point was when the prisoners were released back into the world after their liberation. He compared the experience of being liberated to that of someone being released from a pressure chamber. That in the same way the pressure from being released can cause physical disfigurement, release from an intense pressure situation has the potential for disfiguring the person's mind. In Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl emphasizes two factors that made a difference for people in his observations of himself and other survivors. One is the freedom of choice. Existential therapy encourages the patient to recognize and utilize their freedom to make meaning from their situations. It is here where you see the main difference between Wade Wilson and most other heroes in fiction. Despite the fact that he has other symptoms of mania, what we did not see is the "I am become death" grandiosity that is a feature of a number of superhero movies. And make no mistake, it's grandiosity, not heroism, and it's not selflessness. Think about how many problems, how many deaths, how many sequels that so-called heroes in these movies have created, simply because it never ever occurred to them that, maybe someone else should handle this.
Aren't the police supposed to be investigating them?
They don't have the tools to analyze it.
They would if you gave them to them.
This isn't being a hero, it's being an adrenaline addict. It's a compulsion that is suggested by the expectation of being a superhero that is a part of the absurd world they live in. But Deadpool has a choice. He frequently resists the pressure to conform to this archetype of the over-functioning, nearly narcissistic superhero who is codependent on the incompetence of law enforcement. Consider the fact that in most superhero movies, even in their very first one, what is the hero doing? They are saving the entire actual world in their very first movie. What is Deadpool doing in his first movie? He tries to get his cancer cured so he can be happy with his fiancée, and tries to get her back after she's in danger. In the sequel, he tries to help out this not super likable kid for no other reason than he relates to him and feels like he's an individual worth saving. Saving the entire world from cosmic evil is not on Wade's radar, and by all counts, he's better for it. The second component that Frankl said is crucial for positive outcomes to stress is the idea of the benevolent observer. That is, the person sees themselves as being quote-unquote observed, or a better word would be accountable to a friend, family, or idea that help them make meaning out of the chaos of life. And that is where you, the viewer, help Deadpool live his best life. At the beginning of the plot of the first movie, Deadpool fills us in on his life as a movie superhero as he begins his manic episode. Deadpool's dialogue with the viewers from the perspective of logotherapy, a form of catharsis.
I know, right? Who's to get my very own movie? I can't tell you, but it does rhyme with pulverine.
The viewer is in on the joke with him about the absurdity of his life as a character in a movie, and by seeing his situation from your perspective, he is able to not get caught up in this must save this, must stop that superhero compulsion, and be a mutant who is true to himself. So while your presence in his life is evidence of a manically induced break from reality, and a possible sign that his hospitalization is imminent, at least for the first two films, you complete him. So what do you think about the diagnosis? Do you agree with the theory that Deadpool's first wall breaks are psychosis? Leave a comment saying what you think. If you want to find out what cluster B disorder is responsible for the dark side of the Force, click here. I'm Walarius the Therapist. Thanks for watching.